Civil forfeiture is one of the biggest threats to property rights in South Carolina. It allows law enforcement to take cash, cars, homes, and other property from South Carolinians without so much as charging, let alone convicting the owner with a crime. It's mind-blowing that Alex Murdaugh got to walk away with everything he owned, but we did some research and figured out why. Hello, True Crime Stories family. Welcome. Police are systematically seizing cash and property many times from people who aren't guilty of a crime, netting millions of dollars each year. South Carolina law enforcement profits from this policing tactic, and the bulk of the money ends up in its possession. Officers gather in places like Spartanburg County for contests with trophies to see who can make the largest or most seizures during highway blitzes. They earn hats, mementos, and free dinners, and agencies that participate take home a cut of the forfeiture proceeds. We will take a deep dive into the reason why Alex walked away with all of his properties and assets. Alex met the civil and criminal criteria to have all of his property confiscated. When scammers, drug dealers, the cartel, gang members, or the mafia get caught committing crimes, the feds normally swoop in and confiscate everything they own down to their last penny. Federal agents were granted seizure of 2 properties owned by a North Carolina woman after she was accused of committing healthcare fraud. In the civil forfeiture documents, the FBI was seeking the forfeiture of 2 Charlotte properties. One in a neighborhood on Cove's Edge Lane, which the woman bought in May 2022, and the second in a neighborhood on Wild Nursery Court, which the woman bought in October 2022. According to investigators, the 2 properties were acquired by unlawful activity, specifically healthcare fraud and wire fraud. The woman fraudulently billed an insurance company for services she didn't provide and wasn't authorized to provide. She submitted more than $7 million in fraudulent claims, and the insurance company paid her more than $4.2 million. The woman sent 2 separate wire transfers that nearly matched the sale prices of the homes on Cove's Edge Lane and Wild Nursery Court. They were able to determine she used money that she fraudulently obtained in order to buy them. In South Carolina, the law permits seizures without a prosecution. However, studies have found that in South Carolina, property is taken from mostly low-level, poor criminals, not kingpins or big-time scammers like Alex. Under federal laws of the United States, law enforcement agencies and prosecutors are allowed to seize property and money from people convicted of certain federal offenses, which is called a forfeiture. Federal prosecutors, however, must be able to prove the defendant used the property or money to commit the offense, earned it from unlawful activity, or purchased the property from illegal behavior. Forfeiture laws are not only designed to be a deterrent for criminal activity, but they are a great source of revenue for all types of law enforcement expenses. In situations where federal law enforcement has valid reasons to believe the property and money were used as instruments to a crime, then they are allowed to confiscate it. What is the purpose of asset forfeiture? Federal agents seize real and personal property under federal statutes, the Comprehensive Drug Abuse and Prevention Control Acts 21 and similar laws. The forfeiture and seizure of property and money is not a separate indictment, but rather a civil proceeding closely connected with the criminal actions. The FBI describes the purpose of those federal asset forfeiture laws as depriving criminals and criminal organizations of their ill-gotten gains. The FBI says it uses forfeiture laws to punish criminals, deter crime, disrupt criminal organizations, and protect communities. Forfeited property and funds frequently go to crime victims, treatment facilities, education programs, law enforcement tools like canines, body cameras, and bulletproof vests. Types of asset forfeiture. Federal asset forfeiture laws generally make 2 types of property subject to forfeiture. Proceeds of crime are the first type of property subject to forfeiture. For example, 21 U.S.C. 853 A.1 includes forfeitable property. Any property constituting or derived from proceeds the person obtained directly or indirectly as the result of the qualifying federal crime. Proceeds are what the suspect gains from the crime, which are often cash or accounts into which the suspect has placed cash gained from the crime. But proceeds can also be things purchased with cash, such as jewelry, vehicles, boats, airplanes, and homes. Instrumentalities of crime are the other type of property generally subject to forfeiture. Any person's property used or intended to be used in any manner to commit or facilitate the commission of the qualifying federal crime. Instrumentalities are what the suspect uses to commit the crime, such as vehicles, homes, warehouses, business locations, boats, airplanes, or guns. When law enforcement agencies seize property, they must take reasonable steps to maintain the property. For example, South Carolina law requires that equipment and vehicles must be removed to an appropriate place for storage. Also, seized money must be deposited in an interest-bearing account pending final disposition by the court unless the money is being held as evidence. Second, within a reasonable time, the prosecution must file a civil forfeiture lawsuit with the solicitor's office asking for the court's permission to permanently keep the property or money. Did the Murdaugh's family reign at the solicitor's office, seal the deal for Alex to escape forfeiture? To seize property, it must be proven that the assets in question meet one of the following criteria. The asset was an instrument in a federal crime. The asset was obtained through criminal activity, or the asset was purchased using the proceeds of a federal crime. Alex meets all three of the requirements. He used all of his properties, his trucks, and investments as an instrument to commit fraud, and he paid for all of his assets with stolen money. The civil and criminal criteria to have property confiscated. When investigators present a forfeiture case, there are several key questions that investigators must provide answers for, as well as supporting evidence. What is the criminal violation? These are just some of Alex's charges from a long list of charges he is facing. 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and bank fraud. 1 count of bank fraud, 2 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of wire fraud, 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, 14 counts of money laundering. Any person convicted of a violation of this subchapter or subchapter 2 punishable by imprisonment for more than 1 year shall forfeit to the United States, irrespective of any provision of state law. 1. Any property constituting or derived from any proceeds the person obtained directly or indirectly as the result of such violation. 2. Any of the person's property used or intended to be used in any manner or part to commit or to facilitate the commission of such violation. 3. In the case of a person convicted of engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise in violation of Section 848 of this title, the person shall forfeit, in addition to any property described in paragraph 1 or 2, any of his interest in, claims against, and property or contractual rights affording a source of control over the continuing criminal enterprise. The federal statute 21 U.S.C. 982 broadens asset forfeiture to apply to these other federal crimes among many others: money laundering, bank bribery, embezzlement, bank embezzlement, counterfeiting, forging endorsements on treasury checks, federal program fraud, federal false statements concealing assets from federal bank agents, Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO, copyright, infringement, identity theft, computer hacking, CP mail, fraud, wire fraud. What property is forfeitable under the statute? Property subject to criminal forfeiture under this section includes 1. Real property, including things growing on, affixed to, and found in land. This means that Alex could have lost Moselle and all of his other properties under this statute. 2. Tangible and intangible personal property, including rights, privileges, interests, claims, and securities. This means all of the Murdaugh's personal items that were auctioned off and his investments could have been confiscated. What evidence specifically ties the asset to the crime or violation? In the Gloria Satterfield case, Alex used Moselle, the asset, as an instrument to commit insurance fraud, the crime, by directly or indirectly causing Gloria Satterfield to fall on his property to steal settlement money from the insurance company that belonged to Gloria Satterfield's sons. In July 2021, Alex got a $750,000 loan for beach house renovations and expenses, which he knew would actually be used to cover hundreds of thousands of dollars in overdraft fees on his personal account. Alex used his beach house, the asset, as an instrument to commit bank fraud, the crime, when he took out a loan for beach house renovations, but he used it to pay back other debts. In the case with Cousin Eddie, Alex used his trucks, the asset, as an instrument to commit drug trafficking, the crime, when he met Cousin Eddie to pick up his oxycodone pills. Alex also used Maggie's truck, the asset, as an instrument in his botched attempt to commit life insurance fraud, the crime, by setting up Cousin Eddie. On September 14, 2011, Russell Lafitte transferred $90,000 from the Plylers' conservatorship to Alex. He spent the money almost immediately. The next day, his account was charged more than $58,000 to pay interest on a loan he took out years earlier to finance a waterfront real estate development that never materialized. In the case with the Plyer sisters, Alex paid interest on his waterfront investment, the asset, by committing insurance fraud, the crime, when he stole their settlement money. Alex used his bank accounts, the asset, as an instrument to commit insurance and bank fraud, the crimes, by depositing stolen checks from his victims into his various accounts. Alex also used checks from his bank account, the asset, to commit money laundering, the crime, by writing millions of dollars worth of checks to Cousin Eddie to purchase drugs. In general, Alex used his victims' stolen money to purchase and finance everything the Murdaugh family owned. How should it be, or how was it seized? When Alex was initially arrested, the feds had an opportunity to confiscate all of his properties, investments, bank accounts, trucks, heavy machinery, boats, and personal items. What is the value of the property? Moselle sold for $3.9 million. Stake in 2TI Island sold for $30,000. Heavy machinery sold for $171,000. Law firm equity buyout for $188,000. Auction proceeds estimate $350,000. The total amount of profit is $5,844,000. This money could have been used to pay back all of his victims that he stole from. When Eamon Cools-Lartigue was driving on Interstate 85 in Spartanburg County, deputies stopped him for speeding. The Atlanta businessman wasn't criminally charged in the April 2016 incident. Deputies discovered $29,000 in his car and decided to take it. When Brandy Cook dropped her friend off at a Myrtle Beach sports bar as a favor, drug enforcement agents swarmed her in the parking lot and found $4,670 in the car. Her friend was wanted in a drug distribution case, but Cook wasn't involved. She had no drugs and was never charged in the 2014 bust. Agents seized her money anyway. She worked as a waitress and carried cash because she didn't have a checking account. She spent more than a year trying to get her money back. It's a dirty little secret. It's so consistent with the issue of how law enforcement functions. They say, "Oh yeah, we want to make sure that resources used for the trafficking of drugs are stopped, but many of the people they are taking money from are not drug traffickers or even users." Greenville attorney Jake Irwin said the overarching idea is that the money being seized is earnings from past drug sales, so it's fair game. In theory, that makes a little bit of sense, he said. The problem is that they don't really have to prove that. In some states, the suspicions behind a civil forfeiture must be proven beyond a reasonable doubt in court, but there is no requirement of proof in South Carolina. When a forfeiture is contested, prosecutors only have to show a preponderance of evidence to keep seized goods. Police don't just seize cash. Most of the money isn't coming from kingpins or money laundering operations. It's coming from hundreds of encounters where police take smaller amounts of cash, often when they find regular people with drugs for personal use. Customers, not dealers. More than 55% of the time when police seized cash, they took less than $1,000. Your cash or property can disappear in minutes, but take years to get back. The average time between when property is seized and when a prosecutor files for forfeiture is 304 days, with the items in custody the whole time. Often it's far longer, well beyond the 2-year period state law allows for a civil case to be filed. But only rarely are prosecutors called out for missing the filing window and forced to return property to owners. The entire burden of recovering property is on the citizens who must prove the goods belong to them and were obtained legally. Since it's not a criminal case, an attorney isn't provided. Citizens are left to figure out a complex court process on their own. Once cases are filed, they have 30 days to respond. Most of the time, they give up. Now we know why and how Alex escaped federal seizure of his property. In South Carolina, they target people who don't have the means to necessarily hire a lawyer and try to fight to get their property back. Final approval of seized property in South Carolina must come from the solicitor's office. After Alex's trial was over, they put his grandfather's picture back on the wall inside of the courthouse. The Murdaugh's last name may be tarnished, but they will forever have the solicitor's office protection, and that's who ultimately protected Alex from federal seizure. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.